So last time I did not have a recap because there was a piece of terrain I wanted to make and I wasn't able to get it ready in time. So, what was that terrain? Why did I want it made so badly? Why did I delay the game in order to finish it? Find out today. Hello everyone, I'm Father Aaron. Welcome to The Dungeon Minister! Just to catch everyone up, our heroes have made it to the Shire. They are there escorting a wagon loaded with weapons. 1,000 short swords, 1,000 short bows, and 1,000 quivers of arrows from Kilmarnock, from the Count of Kilmarnock, who couldn't send soldiers because he's sort of involved in a civil war, almost, kind of, any day now. But he did want to help defend the Dwarven kingdom from invasion by goblins, partly because he's pretty sure that has something to do with his own issues. At any rate, he has sent weaponry to the Halflings in the Shire with the hopes that they will take up those arms and their own arms. In their arms, I guess, with their hands, really. Arms in their hands. Anyway, they'll take up arms and assist their neighbors to the north, the Dwarves. They have also come accompanying Birion, a dwarf who had been sent by the king of the Dwarves as an emissary to the Count, hoping for human troops and settling for Halflings. Anyhow, we left off when our heroes had reached the Shire, and just when Birion was about to go and speak to the Master Sheriff, the sheriff in charge of the entire Shire. The entire Shire. Sorry. They're about to go in to the sheriff's hold. Just to recap, though, for those who are new to the channel, we have 4 heroes, played by my 3 sons and my wife. The heroes are Fleetwood and Bob Johnny, now 5th level elves, Touchberry, the 6th level halfling, and Fawr, the 6th level thief. There they are, standing outside of the sheriff's hold, and a debate starts. Should we go in or should we not? Fawr and Bob Johnny don't want to go in. Fleetwood is sort of on the fence. Touchberry really wants to go in. He really wants to go in there and find out what happens, essentially. He wants to hear what goes on. He wants to hear the arguments, and, if possible, help convince the sheriff to assist the dwarves. So it goes back and forth a couple of times. Eventually they come down on Touchberry's side and they decide to go in. In they go, where they are greeted by an officious, a halfling, stout individual, glasses and messy hair, who says, Hello. How may I help you? All of my characters sound like this. Even the women. I don't know. Birion does most of the talking for this because, of course, this is his mission, although Touchberry puts in a good word here and there. He thinks another halfling might grease the wheels a little bit. Okay, so they do get in to see the Master Sheriff, and she greets them in a room where she's clearly packing up to leave. It's late in the day. She wants to head out. She's almost done. She's looking at papers and what shall she take home? What should she throw in the fire? What should she leave here? You know, that kind of thing. Like you do at the end of a day at the office. Throw some things in the fire. Don't fire me, Bishop. So she's a bit distracted when the whole encounter begins, and it is Touchberry who grabs her attention by reminding her of who he is and who his companions are and what they've done for the Shire. Finally, the Master Sheriff does pay attention, and after Birion introduces himself, she comments that she hasn't seen a dwarf in quite some time. It has been at least 2 weeks since any dwarven merchants have come down the river. This is concerning. I let Touchberry know because he would have been local here. This is where he came from, so he would know. The merchants from the dwarves come down regularly. That's their main trading partner. They trade with the humans through the Shire. They trade with the halflings, and the halflings then carry it on to the humans, and the halflings give human goods to the dwarves who take them back up the river. The halflings don't really like boats that much, so yeah, I took that from Tolkien. They stay on land and they let the dwarves do all the carting back and forth, and then they'll go by wagon down to Kilmarnock. At any rate, the Master Sheriff says, it's been a couple of weeks and we're getting worried. Now this news worries Birion a great deal because he tells her, there have been goblin raids, the goblins are pouring out of the mountains. This must mean that the attack has landed, that they have finally massed their armies, and that it has happened. We are under attack. That's the only thing that would stop the back and forth of goods, as if they couldn't get through. So now Birion is very anxious, and he pleads his case. The Master Sheriff is a little on the fence. I don't know. And so the party steps up. The party steps up to convince her. And Fleetwood leads this for two reasons. He's the oldest boy. He does most of the talking for his brothers. And two, he has the highest charisma. And he bases his argument on this. If the halflings do not fight the goblins in the Dwarven Kingdom, they will eventually fight them in the Shire. It is inevitable. They will not stop at the Dwarven Kingdom. This lands with the Master Sheriff, and she says, I must bring it to the sheriffs of the Shire. I must bring it to our council. I'll have to call them together. I will summon them tonight. I will send messengers out. They should gather tomorrow. We can have an answer for you midday. All right, off they go. Touchberry is interested in connecting with his girlfriend, and we've decided that her name is Cornflower. The halflings are... well, they're sort of Irish, but I don't use Irish names for them. The place names are Irish, but I just use sort of nature-based names for the halflings. Touchberry, Cornflower, Skytree, things like that. So he's going to go off and see his girlfriend, Cornflower, and she's happy to see him. She's very worried about what he's been up to. She does not like to hear anything about fighting dragons or wizards or werewolves or any of that. But she's very happy to see him. His mother and father, of course, welcome them in, give them dinner, and invite them to spend the night. The beds are short, but comfortable. Finally, the answer does come. The Shire has gathered, they have conferred, and they will go to aid their neighbors to the north. Whew. Good. Okay. Great. How many soldiers do you think you can provide? We've got 1,000 swords, 1,000 bows, 1,000 quivers of arrows. Do you think you can use them all? I think we can, says the Master Sheriff. This is big, because the last time they raised an army, it was not that large. When the goblins had a raiding party in the Shire, there weren't that many. They have clearly decided that this is an existential threat, and the entire Shire must be raised. All of the militias who can go. The very elderly will stay behind, to fill out the sort of home defense kind of thing, but most of them are going to go. So, the Master Sheriff says it's going to take 2 or 3 days to gather the troops. We're going to have to call them in from all parts of the Shire, make sure they are equipped and kitted out. Thank you for the weapons, we will accept them. We're going to have to take some time. You may want to go ahead of us. Birion, particularly, does want to go. His homeland has been attacked, clearly. He wants to go see what is happening. And the 4 party members, they want to go as well. They want to see what's happening. And they say, we can act as scouts. We'll go ahead. We'll make sure the way is safe. And then you can follow up behind. Great. They do leave Athenry. Athenry is the seat of the Shire. It's the community in the middle. I don't want to say city. It's really just a village. But the halflings being rural people. They live in farms and things like that. Athenry is the community in the middle. Clonovidage is in the south. That's the larger, the commercial hub. Athenry is the political center. And then there's Kilskay in the north, which is a very small community. They leave Athenry with a number of halfling troops who are handy. They're on the site, they're local, and they all march north, just in case. Just in case goblins come down before they're ready, they want to have something up there near Kilskay. And it's kind of fun. As they enter, it's a big deal, right? This many halfling soldiers haven't gotten together in a dog's age. They just don't tend to organize for war like this. So as they march through, I describe, halfling children coming out wide-eyed and watching all the soldiers, and then elves, and a human, and a dwarf too. Is that Touchberry? Is that Touchberry? That pumps up my middle guy a little bit. So, big excitement, big excitement. The halflings make camp outside of Kilskay, and the party continues north. On they go. They cut across the fields and into the forest where they find the river and a road alongside the river. Not a proper paved road or anything, but just a path that gets regularly trod, regularly walked. Sometimes ponies are used to pull a barge up the river to get back up to the Dwarven Kingdom, things like that. And there's foot traffic and carts and whatnot. It's not a really, large established road, but it's enough to follow, very easily to follow. So they decide they're going to take this because if an army comes south, it's going to come on this road, right? And they want to be able to see it coming and send news, take news south. They do spend one night camping in the forest, and I roll up a random encounter. All that comes up is a giant shrew, which is almost immediately sent away by Bob Johnny with his ring of animal control. So no problem there, but it gives some interest to the night. The next day, they continue north. They're going very cautiously, very carefully. They don't want to make a lot of noise. They don't want to be detected. If there are goblins coming south, the party wants to see the goblins before the goblins see them, right? So they're being cautious, careful, very, very watchful. Near the end of the day, they're thinking it might be time to look for a camp, and they're discussing, should we press on until we can actually see Llyn Fawr? I think I'm saying that right. It's Welsh. My dwarfs are Welsh. Should we press on till we can see the Dwarven Kingdom and the great lake in front of it, or should we stop short of that? They're talking that over when suddenly there's a noise, just a rustling, a slight noise from the brush, and out of it emerges a dwarf. A very well armored and armed dwarf. Fierce, grim, tough-looking. Clearly he has been in battle. He bears wounds, scars. He sees them, and hammer in hand and sword in the other, he stops. Huh! Birion! Birion turns. Gwent nos! Gwent nos! Gwent nos, incidentally, is Welsh, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but is Welsh for night wind. A little nod to my buddy Lightmane, who has a channel, and he's got a whole story he's written, and his dwarven character is named Nightwind. So check him out, incidentally. Anyway, Nightwind, Gwent nos, emerges from the shrubs. He is a scout for the dwarves. His job is to be sneaky in the woods. Now, the mini that I painted up is covered in plate mail and chainmail armor, so he probably wouldn't be that sneaky. It's a cool mini. My paint job's not that great, but it's a cool mini, and I like the idea of these scouts who, even though they're dwarves, who are normally described as being noisy, are very, very stealthy, right? That was kind of cool. Anyway, he steps out and greets Birion. What news, Gwent nos? What news do you have for me? No good news, Birion, nothing to your comfort. The enemy have attacked. They came upon us suddenly, a week or two ago. I'm losing track of time out here. They came upon us in great numbers. We just had time to seal the doors, to draw within. And now they surround the mountain. Now, you may know from my world-building video that the Dwarven Kingdom is in a mountain, and the cliff of that mountain comes right down to a large lake. Around the lake there is a piece of land, but it is a very narrow stretch along where the cliffs are. There's a forest on the other side, but right by the Dwarven Kingdom it's quite narrow, so it creates a sort of Thermopylae situation, right? A narrow space where a handful can hold it. But so great were the numbers of goblins, and goblins can also navigate the mountains just as well as dwarves. And so sudden and so great were the numbers, they just withdrew into the mountain and sealed themselves inside. I and my men were outside of the mountain when the goblins descended. We watched them come, Birion. From the south side of the lake we watched them come. Like cockroaches spilling out of the crevices. Everywhere they were. They have found the pass. They have found the pass to the north. They poured down it. There's a sort of a secret pass through the mountains that the dwarves thought they were the only ones that knew about, but the goblins have found it. They poured in, thousands of them, and now we are besieged. My men and I have been searching through the forest and the mountains finding small communities of dwarves that still hold out, ones who are isolated, gathering them, building strength, trying to protect those who are helpless. We have moved many into safety, others have joined us. And now we harry the enemy, we attack where we can and withdraw. There's so few of us outside of the mountain. Birion is affected by this. So are the players, actually. This sounds bad, really bad. In addition to all their other troubles, here come a load of goblins. And there is worse, Birion. Among the goblins walk men. Men of great strength and wildness. Werewolves. If Value's behind this, I'll bet Value is behind this. He comes from the north, he has all sorts of allies, he'll mix with any foul thing. I'll bet he's behind this. There is more, and worse. My scouts tell me there is a giant on the way. How big? We're not sure. He's only been seen from a distance. Big enough, how's that? And worse, he comes bringing polar bears with him. Most likely a frost giant, but we don't know. Frost giant, eh? We've fought giants before. Yeah, we fought a hill giant. That's a lot smaller than a frost giant. Okay, well, we're a lot tougher than we used to be. If he joins the goblin army, it will be something terrible. He will have the strength to tear down the gates of the kingdom. The goblins will pour in. The slaughter will be terrible. Well, if he has to be stopped, let's go. It'd be better to fight him up there than to let him get down here and surrounded by goblins. Much easier 1-on-1, or 4-on-1. My boys can smell an adventure hook a mile away. Not 4-on-1, 5-on-1. Birion will go with them. No, not 5-on-1, 6-on-1, says Gwent Noss. You have my hammer, and my axe. And I believe you have my swing line stapler. You have my stapler. You borrowed my stapler and you said you give it back. You never give it back. You have my swing line stapler. They decide they're going to go fight the giant in the north. Now, Gwent Noss says that it has been seen heading toward the northern end of the pass. So they figure the giant knows about the pass as well. The goblins have let him know, or however that works. And so he's probably coming down that way as well. That's where they will go. Now you know why I needed some constrained terrain. I need a pass through the mountains, and I want it to be very narrow. At any rate, off they go to intercept this giant. But right now it is time to sleep, and so they're going to make camp. But they want to send word down to the Halfling army, which is assembling behind them and may even be beginning to march north. They want to send word what's happening up here, what the situation on the ground is, how many goblins, because Gwent Noss tells them it's approximately 3,000 goblins, he thinks, estimating, and potentially werewolves, dire wolves. He's got counts for all these things, or estimates for these things. They want to send that information on south. Okay, but they don't want to take the time to go south and north. And Gwent Noss says, not a problem. And he whistles in a way that I can't, with your fingers. I can't do that. Anyway, he whistles, and out from the brush emerges a younger dwarf. Very scarred, very, very, battle-weary looking. This dwarf emerges. Again, someone who was right there. They could have reached out and touched him, but they couldn't even see him there. Sneaky dwarves. Anyway, and this is one of Gwent Noss's men, and he orders him, he says, you need to go down to the Halflings and bear this message, and they confer what the message will be, and they send this young dwarf off. And Gwent Noss, as he leaves, Gwent Noss says, he's seen too much already, too young. I don't want to take him into more danger. Best he carry a message, rather than a sword for now. He then leads them into the woods, where they discover a whole company of dwarves. We're just off the path, there's probably a dozen or so just off the path, hidden behind boulders and trees and stuff. They particularly melt into the rock. If they are crouching behind or hiding behind the rocks, they're almost indistinguishable. I kind of like the idea of dwarves being attached to the earth, being almost substance of the earth, the way trolls are, on the chaotic evil side, the dwarves are on the side of good and lawful. Anyway, so he leads them through this group, and they all sort of melt behind them and follow up the hill. There's a set of hills here to the crest of it where they have a camp established. And their tents look almost like bulges in the ground. They have shelters that are almost just bulges in the grass. They're so well camouflaged. Their fire is contained within a huge ring of rocks that's very high, so its light doesn't broadcast, right? But they can still cook over the top of it. All sorts of little details like that. And from there they can see. From there they can see across the bit of woods to the great lake and the mountain. And from this distance, the human can only see wisps of smoke here and there. The halfling can kind of make out a faint black smudge, but the elves can definitely see a moving mass of something before the mountain. The goblins, they are here in numbers. So, this is what they're seeing. And of course, it's getting near night, so they're becoming more active, right? So they can see that. They make camp. Touchberry makes sure to share some of the rations of the dwarves. It's disgusting stuff, cram, but he eats it anyway because Touchberry. And he eats his rations on top of that. The next day they set off. Most of the dwarves are going to stay because they have business. They have other little pockets of dwarves, settlements, communities that they have to go and check on and evacuate, etc., recruit from. But Gwent, Nos, and Birion are going to go with the party and guide them to the pass. Down the hill they go and into the forest, and a day's travel is simply spent in the forest, picking their way through very cautiously, very slowly, very quietly. But for all of their caution, eventually, about halfway through the day, sure enough, goblins! 5 goblins jump them from the bushes, hoping that their surprise will win the day. They also don't know how strong these particular adventurers are, and they find out to their cost. One of them almost gets away. He's running for it, as the battle is clearly going in the favor of the heroes. I mean, it doesn't take them long. Goblins are, one hit dice -1. They're not really strong. But as most of them are falling to swords and axes and whatnot, one of them runs. He's booting it through the forest. He's going to go and alert the armies. But Bob Johnny is there, and magic missile. Down he goes. I mean, it's just slaughter, right? 3 magic missiles now that Bob Johnny casts. So down he goes. They make their way a little further, and they camp in the woods. No fire, cold food. The halfling is not happy at all, but they camp there. And the next day they continue, and they come to where the forest thins out and the mountains begin. Hilly at first, broken land, and then the mountains. And Gwent Nos guides them to a pass through the mountains. This, I imagined, was a sort of channel, maybe a lava channel at one point. Maybe these mountains were, maybe they still are, volcanic. Maybe there's some heat in here. Maybe that's why the dwarves have their home here. They use the magma as a forge, to heat. I don't know. At any rate, I liked the idea of a channel that is carved in volcanic rock, pitted and grotesque almost. And again, this is why I needed the terrain, or why I wanted the terrain. You don't need the terrain, but it really does help when you're playing with kids. And here comes trouble. Oh, I didn't tell them about the terrain, why I needed to have it. You'll have to tune in next week.